By the way, when I was in Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Grand Prix, they'd already set up the track and had built the stands, and they have to have some fake temporary bridges built to go over roadways to keep that city moving while the Grand Prix in there. It's a massive setup. And that's been, what, a month ago?
Well, I was out there, I guess the first time they did it, May of 23.
Yeah, so last year, yeah.
But, I mean, that city already is logistically a nightmare.
You know who doesn't like it? The locals.
Oh, gosh.
I bet.
That's what they get for a living there.
Let's talk to one of them. You want to talk to one of them?
Yeah.
Todd Fuhrman, BetTheBoardPodcast.com with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Fuhrman, do you just stay at home when the F1 is in town?
I did last year. I am actually going to venture into the belly of the beast later today. I will be down there for the final practice session and qualifying. That'll kick off around 11 o'clock tonight local time. Logistically, you guys are exactly right. If you're trying to navigate from the east side of the strip to the west side of the strip, it is a little bit perilous, to say the least. Thankfully for us to try and get from where we live in town, there are a couple of shortcuts and ways you can kind of sneak into the casino. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it's a little bit smoother than the 2.5 hours of rumblings of traffic that I was hearing yesterday.
Let's talk about some of the games. And I want to start with the biggest one, Ohio State and Indiana. This game has dropped overnight. I think, depending on where you look at it, at mybookie.ag, it's dropped by 3 full points from 13.5 to 10.5, which seems like a relatively significant drop this late in the week for a game of that magnitude.
Yeah, a little bit surprising to see this number come crashing down. We, of course, know about the big injury to Ohio State's transfer center and Seth McLaughlin, who came over from Alabama to try and solidify that group. The offensive line was one of the major question marks for the Buckeyes coming into the season, and it's a group that hasn't probably been tested to the level that we anticipated coming in. Now, important to note, this number did get as low as 10. We started to see a little bit of Ohio State money surface again this morning, so we'll call kind of 10.5 to consensus and even some 11s there. I think the big question that has to be answered in this game, can Ohio State win and do so by margin, of course? Indiana, 2 weeks to prepare for this game. We know that the committee has made a lot of their resume, and rightfully so, that if Indiana were to go into Columbus and get blown out here, an 11-1 record, even in one of the top 2 conferences in the country, might not be enough to get them across the finish line. I've been a little bit surprised by some of the over money that's come in as well. Total got as low as 51. We're now kind of out to that 53 range. That would be the angle that intrigued me the most to try and go under. I think if Ohio State's going to win this game and do so by margin, you're going to see them be able to assert their physical dominance on both the offensive and defensive lines. And I think this Indiana offense, we saw glimpses of their struggles in the second half against Michigan when they stepped up in class. Still some major reservations there, but no doubt one of the marquee games of the day that'll go a long way in defining the college football playoff picture.
You know, this is one of those that usually is, like, I feel like it's on a platter when you can get a quality favorite and you've got the public all over the dog. I can't pull the trigger on it. I won't take Indiana either, but I think Indiana plays within the number.
And I think this game a little higher variance than what we saw last week, where when we broke down the Tennessee-Georgia game, people couldn't get enough of the Vols as an underdog of more than a touchdown going into Athens, and it was Georgia getting you to the window with the 31-17 win after covering. Not quite apples to apples, but for me, I kind of echo those same sentiments. I can see a path for Indiana to be competitive from start to finish, but just ingrained in my DNA that I can't get myself to back a dog in this particular price range with all the buzz around them. Although, look, that's not the blue-haired old ladies leaving the bingo parlor driving this number from 13 down to 10. So there is a little bit of respected money that has come in on the Hoosiers for the marquee game of the early slate.
I'll give my first question to Luke, who's a big Bama fan. He's coming to Vegas for the basketball that'll be there, and he says his first bet he ever is going to make will be in the Harbowl, the Ravens and Chargers. Can you help him out with a play? Who do you like in that?
Yeah, this game we've seen a good amount of over money come in. Total reopened 47.5 on Monday morning after the Chargers defense couldn't really handle the dynamic passing attack of the Bengals, and that's the one group that I think everybody across the league still has questions about, because you go through the Chargers' schedule and opposing offenses they face, not exactly a murderer's row. The side, though, is interesting because while the Ravens come into this game off a disappointing performance against the Steelers, we've seen it kind of ping-pong back and forth between 3 and 2.5. Unfortunately, I don't have a play in this game myself, but I would tell Luke, if you like the Ravens, shop around, lay 2.5. Don't do yourself a disservice and lay 3. And if you like the underdog, be sure to grab the 3, because I don't think it would surprise anybody if we were talking about this game being a field goal contest one way or the other.
Todd Fuhrman is with BetTheBoardPodcast.com, at Todd Fuhrman on social media. BetTheBoardPodcast.com is where you find his thoughts on a lot of games. He has been scorching hot on his under-the-radar play. We will definitely get one of those before this visit is over, so do not worry. You guys ask us every week. We're going to do it, I promise you. Auburn feels like they've become a sexy pick to win outright over Texas A&M Saturday night. The number's still at Texas A&M 2.5. Do you like what seems like so many people like Auburn in this game, Fuhrman?
I do, but I haven't gotten there yet with a bet. 3 would be my buy point on the Tigers, and I don't think the market is ever actually going to get to that point for the kickoff at Jordan-Hare Saturday night. When you go through Texas A&M's schedule, there are a couple of problematic results of late when you look at how the defense has performed when they've stepped up in class, and even against some of the lesser teams in the SEC, there have been some concerns. Now, Auburn fans know all too well that this offense hasn't exactly been dynamic and won't be able to throw the football the same way as some of the other teams that have given the Aggies problems. But for me, I just don't love the quarterback situation right now for Texas A&M. We've seen some kinks in the armor for Marcel Reed and some of the quarterback run game more so than anything else. Not a useful data point last week by any stretch for A&M. Beating New Mexico State 38-3, but I can see why Auburn is attracting some attention. For me, if I was getting involved now with some of the numbers that are widely available, I would be much more intrigued to look to go under in the first half. I think these defenses can have some success with quarterbacks and offenses that don't really have a ton of big play potential. So do shop around. There should be some 23s out there, and that would probably be the angle that I would look to take.
I'll lay it or don't play it for me is in Norman on Saturday night with Alabama. I know the public money is all over Bama minus the 2 touchdowns. I just don't think this Oklahoma team is very good, and I think Alabama's peaking at the right time.
And Oklahoma fans would echo those same sentiments. It feels like this was a game that they had circled early in the year. They thought it was going to be an electric atmosphere to get one of the perennial blue bloods and college football powerhouses into Norman and kind of show them what life was like in a venue that they weren't all that familiar with. Well, the season has more or less gotten off the rails for Oklahoma, so much so that they're going to need to pull off an upset, not only this week or next week, to be able to get back to the postseason where they haven't missed a bowl game since the late 90s. This is actually the largest underdog spread that OU has faced in their own building since the late 90s, and you can understand why. For an Oklahoma offense that really lacks punch, they've had some major concerns along the offensive line. I understand why the 14s have kind of turned into 13.5, but I'm right there with you, LT. I would want no part of the Sooners as a home underdog here. Tried to dig into this game and find a compelling case to make for them, but I worry about their ability to contain this Alabama passing attack as a secondary for OU. When they step up in class, hasn't exactly exceeded expectations.
Army and Notre Dame play at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. We saw a snow game last night in the NFL. I just checked the forecast. No precipitation in the 40s, though, for this game. I think there are a lot of people, especially here in the South, that'll be cheering for Army to pull the upset here.
I think they would love that path to kind of remove Notre Dame from playoff consideration. And for the first time in a long time, these two teams will meet with both of them being ranked for the first time since 1958. I mean, Army has lost 15 straight meetings against Notre Dame. They don't play annually like we've seen with Notre Dame and Navy. The big question for Army, can they do enough to shorten the game and limit possessions from a cover standpoint? I won't talk about the outright win. We saw Army when they were at their best against North Texas, arguably the most dynamic offense they faced before they'll see Notre Dame this weekend. North Texas had 6 possessions in that game, and if that's a similar pace and tempo that we see here, it makes it increasingly difficult for Notre Dame to run away and hide and win by 2 touchdowns plus. On the other side of the ball for Notre Dame defensively, I mean, they should have a level of preparation for this particular matchup, having seen Navy early in the year. And while Army and Navy don't run similar offenses, it's a nice luxury to have Tyler Buckner as your scout team quarterback, running the option representing Bryson Daly all week long. This a battle, though, as well. Number got as high as 17. You saw dog money there. Number gets down to 14 where we're sitting. I think you'll see a little bit of support for the favorite. What surprised me some is that the total has ticked up from 44 to 46. Lean Notre Dame here, but will no doubt be fascinated to watch this game unfold given the contrast in style.
Todd Fuhrman, BetTheBoardPodcast.com. Let's go to the Swamp. Ole Miss is at Florida. If this were a night game, I'd feel a little better about Florida. But They played pretty well against LSU last year. What do you make of Ole Miss on the road? They're laying about 12 or so at mybookie.ag in Gainesville.
Yeah, numbers continued to leak out. You had an opportunity to lay 10 with Ole Miss, and I fully understand why this number has been on the move. I actually still think there's a little bit of value on the Rebels at this price until we get to 13. Florida, tremendous win last week against LSU, 27-16 on the scoreboard. But you dig into that box score, and Florida was out on the field defensively for more than 90 plays. LSU more or less played keep away. They just weren't able to protect Garrett Nussmeier as Florida pinned their ears back and came after the talented LSU quarterback. This Gators team before the year, I know when we were breaking down some of the previews, said that if they got to 6 wins, Billy Napier wasn't going to get nearly enough credit. But here we are, and Florida has given themselves an opportunity that even if they lose this weekend against Ole Miss, can go on the road to Tallahassee, knock off Florida State, and get bowl eligible. Ole Miss, perfect time for a bye, so you don't worry as much about a flat spot or a letdown after that big Georgia win. And the one thing we've seen out of Oxford, this team getting healthier. I fully expect Trey Harris to be out there in full capacity. Caden Lee talked about some of the aches and pains, nicks and bruises of going through the SEC gauntlet, helping him out. And we've seen other playmakers emerge. Look for Ole Miss's defensive line to be able to really dominate here. Not a neighborhood I drive through often, guys, laying double digits on the road in conference, but I think it's favored or pass. I would expect Ole Miss to win this game by 2 touchdowns.
Okay, I got a few games I want to ask. So if this is your below-the-radar game, just let me know, and we'll save it for the end. Is it in Lawrence, Kansas?
It is not in Lawrence, Kansas.
Okay.
So this is a Jayhawks team, LT, that I wasn't overly impressed with last week. I had a piece of Kansas against BYU, was thrilled with the result, but watched that game in its entirety and felt pretty fortunate that pooch punt fell the right way of the Jayhawks. But Kansas should be able to run the ball against Colorado here. Jayhawks need to win each of their remaining 2 games to get bowl eligible, but it'll be on the KU secondary. Can they slow down LeJontay Wester and Travis Hunter on the outside? Lance Leipold has had phenomenal game plans early, and I think if you like the Jayhawks here, you may want to get in and out of this game. I think you'll get Kansas's best in the first 30 minutes, so I would be much more inclined to back them in the first half in the full game.
Penn State, a team that I just don't believe belongs in the college football playoff. They have had a benefit of a schedule. They haven't beaten anybody. They've lost their one, quality game. Now, this is a game that I pointed out about a month ago could be dangerous for Penn State. This number has drifted back and forth between 10.5 and 12.5. I don't know if this is your below-the-radar game. Is it?
Nope, we will not be at a power conference for the below-the-radar games. But I'm happy to offer my thoughts on this one as well. I would agree with you. I think Penn State, yes, they check a lot of boxes when you go through the counting stats and even some of their underlying metrics, but they don't look and feel like a college football playoff team to me. So much like you, I'll find myself rooting for Minnesota. No bet in hand on the Gophers in this game just yet, but Minnesota, 2 weeks to prepare. P.J. Fleck has been tremendous in these kind of spots with extra time to come up with a few unique wrinkles. The one concern I do have with Minnesota is they haven't run the ball the way that I would like to back an underdog in this particular price range. We saw them before the bye against Rutgers throw the ball 40-plus times for the first time since P.J. Fleck took over. It was actually the most pass-happy they've been. I think it was 46 total attempts. If they're going to rely on the passing game with Max Brosmer, not going to set up well. But Penn State has struggled in limited trips to the Twin Cities, and maybe it happens again here. So it's no doubt dog or pass, and we can all hope that Minnesota pulls off the outright upset.
Last time Texas A&M was at Auburn under the lights at Jordan-Hare Stadium, it probably was the biggest win for interim head coach Cadillac Williams. Carnell Williams was the coach then. Here's the Aggies again, playoff and SEC championship contenders. Does it end for the Aggies down on the Plains again?
First half under makes some sense in this particular game. I think both of these offenses lack some of that big play potential, and the opportunity to hit the explosives may not be there. The biggest concern for Auburn, offensive line, can they slow down Texas A&M's defensive front? If they can, it'll create some passing lanes for Peyton Thorne. 3 would be a buy point on the home underdog. Other than that, I will probably be on the sidelines. As you guys mentioned, starting to get a little bit trendy, calling for the outright upset with Auburn.
America's team is back in prime time as the Rams host the Eagles Sunday night. This number has dipped down. Everybody says is the biggest threat to Detroit the Philadelphia Eagles. Now the 8-2 Eagles take on the 5-5 Rams, who have won 4 of 5. The Rams catching 2.5. The Rams are the right way.
The Rams may be the biggest threat to the Rams, given the level of inconsistency that we have seen from this team. And this has been a battle as well around that key number. You mentioned 2.5. There are 3s if you find yourself wanting to back the underdog. Always want folks to get the best of it. And that would be the way that I would look with this Rams team, even against Philadelphia, who comes in off the mini-bye. The one concern for both of these teams, can either of them break tendency, as both have been brutally slow starters. Over the first 11 weeks of the season, the Eagles averaged just 1.4 points per game in the first quarter, and the only teams that they've been better than are the Rams and the Bears. I don't think the Rams want to find themselves in a spot where they're playing from behind. Matthew Stafford on Sunday Night Football hasn't exactly been great, but I do have some concerns about Philadelphia's ability to protect. The Rams just need to get home with their high pressure rate, because that secondary, as you know all too well, leaves a little bit to be desired. So if I was backing the Rams here, I would definitely shop around for the 3, and still haven't gotten there yet, but may very well do so before kickoff if I get 24 in the first half total.
I've lost track, but I think we're up to 8-1 on the under the radar game, if I am not mistaken. I believe it was 7-1 last week. Fuhrman gave you another easy winner with South Alabama. So let's do it, Fuhrman. Todd Fuhrman, your under the radar game, which has been scorching hot, is what?
There were 2 games I actually toyed with. I debated staying in the great state of Alabama to back Troy plus the 10 and fade Louisiana for the second straight week. But instead, we're going to do a little bit more dumpster diving and back Louisiana Monroe plus the 3 against Arkansas State. This is a ULM program that hasn't experienced a ton of postseason success. And on paper, this appears to be their best shot to get bowl eligible with their regular season finale against the aforementioned Raging Cajuns next week. But you dig into ULM, and you can understand why they've started to struggle over the last handful of games. It's been a step up in class in terms of who they've taken on from the Sun Belt, and of course the game against an SEC opponent didn't go all that well for them last week. But South Alabama, Marshall, and Texas State, 3 of the better teams in the conference. Arkansas State wouldn't fall into that particular bucket. And while the Red Wolves continue to rattle off wins, they got themselves bowl eligible last week. They were blown out at the hands of Louisiana 55-19 the week before, narrowly escaped Troy 34-31, and the only win that they've had by margin in the league against a Southern Miss team that looks like they folded the tents a couple of weeks ago. So I expect Bryant Vincent to get the best out of Monroe. Will it be enough to win the game outright? Not sure, but I'm more than happy to try and take the 3 against an Arkansas State team that I think will be feeling big, fat, and happy after getting eligible for the postseason. Massive game for the Warhawks, and especially on the recruiting trail to get that elusive 6th win.
ULM plus the 3. That is the under the radar play from Todd Fuhrman. You can get all his games, bettheboardpodcast.com, bettheboardpodcast.com. Also follow him on social media at Todd Fuhrman. Have a great weekend, Fuhrman. We always appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Enjoy the great games this weekend. Should be a lot of fun as always.